He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole wide world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the major plan stealers in his hands. He's got the first time offenders in his hands. He's got the licensed real estate agent in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the young dermatologist in his hands. He's got the bank loan officers in his hands. He's got the bad motorcycles in his hands. He's got the whole world in his hands.
Good evening, dear friends. It's 6:30 in the Central Time Zone here of the United States of America, where most of you are watching from. Others around the world, I don't know what time it is where you are, but I'm glad that you stayed awake or got up early so you could see me here tonight. I'm Paul Colby. Tonight, for about the umpteenth time, I'm hosting Public Affairs, Public Access here on Houston Media Source. For those of you who are catching the act, so to speak, for the very first time, you should know that I'm regarded as an iconoclast in some quarters, and I'm regarded as a visionary in some small communities, and as a wild man in probably more communities than that, and a further figure, if you like that term, somebody who pushes the envelope for you a little bit and advances commentary on what's going on that you're not going to get anywhere else that I can think of. Sure, you can go to talk radio and you can go to superficial news broadcasts that go 24 hours a day, and you can get your daily dose of not very substantial information and not very well thought out information and not very clear-minded information about any number of topics. But when you come here, you'll get something that goes way off the tracks as often as not. And if it's not off the tracks, then at least it knows where the tracks are. Am I making myself clear? Well, maybe not. But if it weren't for an institution like Public Access, you wouldn't hear voices like mine, and you wouldn't see a lovable face like this either. So be grateful, folks, that you're tuning in to a place where you can get the real lowdown from a real highbrow. And by the way, my scriptwriter didn't finish that sentence, so I guess I'm supposed to do it myself. As always, I'm going to run through quite a few topics here. You know that's what I do. That's why I have to time myself with my little tablet device, the kind so many people use these days. I frequently come here with just a few things to say, and when that 1 hour button gets pushed, I haven't got to half of what's in the notebook. So I told my staff this week, don't bother to prepare me a briefing book on everything that's happened this week. I just want to talk about a few things that come to mind. And the first thing that would come to mind for almost any of you talking to almost anybody else is the weather. It is so hot. It is so dry, right? Well, except for right now on the East Coast where they're looking at a slightly different environment. But around here where I come from, and in places close to where I come from, and out west from where I come from, and probably in many of the other parts of the globe, including continents that I'm just reaching for the first time tonight, it's been pretty darn hot. In Houston, over 100 for just about a month. And even though I love running in it, most living things don't do that well. You know, I have to say something about my garden. I have to say something about, for example, my basil, because in this very, very harsh environment, my basil is doing really, really well, don't you think? And I have to say, like any other proud gardener would have to admit, the rest of the garden is not doing that well. You can see that. So that's about what it's like for most people in town these days. But one thing we do know, one thing this proves once and for all, is that all of this global warming talk, you can just forget about that. what people are doing now, I was being sarcastic there, wasn't I? Anyway, a lot of people want to deal with the heat in as many innovative ways as possible, and you can go to any number of websites and pick up any number of health-related periodicals which will tell you useful things like, you know, get plenty of water and wear loose clothing and shower very often. Now, a lot of this stuff is good advice as far as it goes, but it doesn't really get you around the bend, does it? For example, wearing loose clothing is pretty good, but if you're an office worker, I'm sure that it's not as loose as you'd like it, and your preference would probably be, if you work in the right kind of an office environment, to have a clothing optional kind of a situation, at least for this part of the year. Not that many places have such a policy, but if you want to call me up after the show, I'll let you know what I do know about that. And same thing with frequent showers. Most of the office buildings where most people work don't have showers for the rank and file to begin with, and even if they did, it would be hard to work in frequent showers for everybody. So you can see my point here. We need some imaginative solutions. And while some people work out very well in jobs like meat cutting or other cold parts of the grocery store, there are various vegetarian friends of mine, and there are various people who are not particularly warm-blooded in the first place who just wouldn't be able to stand around in the grocery store all day to be able to deal with the heat. And caves, I want to point out, are a good place to work when it's hot, but there are not that many people today working from caves. Now, they could be, of course. If you're working with your laptop already, just make sure your battery is fully charged before you go down into the earth for the better part of a day, and maybe you can get it done there. If it hasn't been tried at your office, you might suggest it. Think of all the jobs that can be done in water or underwater. Maybe you have a line of work that abets itself to that sort of an adjunct, you know, a liquid adjunct, a periphery of moisture that well, what I'm trying to say is you have to take advantage of the water if that's permissible in your line of work. For a lot of people, it simply isn't permissible. But I did want to say that as dry as it's been, I'm surprised there aren't more entrepreneurs peddling the rain-making solution on the streets today. You know, if you looked at history, you would find that back in the day, General Electric had a famous scientist who got the notion of seeding clouds going, and this was very popular for some time. Of course, it was quickly taken over by the military. It seems to have lost favor after some of the early controlled experiments just didn't produce exactly what they were after. In other words, you could produce very controlled snowstorms or rainstorms in just a little tiny geographical area, but it wasn't as predictable as was hoped. And so it sort of became, well, one of those things that just never made it up the assembly line. And you kind of wonder these days, with all of those jet aircraft, probably military, moving upstairs and dropping some chemtrails on all of us down here, which are designed to do who knows what, it depends on who you ask. Well, I think if they're going to do some dropping from some high level, it ought to be cloud seeding. But since that's not done very much anymore, it opens the door for people who are rainmakers. And throughout history, there have been several who are very good. And of course, the Native American Indians continue to do rain dances these days. But I don't see very many ads for rainmakers, because today I spent a long time looking to see if I could find a rainmaker who could come, for example, to a city like Houston. Unfortunately, these days the term rainmaker also has a different meaning in marketing and business. Some go-getter who really peps up sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I recommend to you, especially if you're out of work and also hot and also wanting to be wet and also wanting to be rich and pretty flexible with what you do and able to tell a good story, that you just pretend like you have the ability to make rain. For example, let's say you needed a certificate to do this. I could even get you in the door. In the places where I come from, all you need is a certificate that says you know what you're doing, and that pretty much takes care of it. So maybe we can set up a website for those of us who want to get this started. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that you're going to get paid if you don't make rain, but maybe it's a knack you have and you don't even know it. I am reminded of a story, apocryphal story. Maybe it's true and maybe it isn't. I can't even remember what the name of the real town is that I'm imagining this to be about. But long time ago, in a small suburban community, a bunch of people decided that the best way to deal with a drought was to wash all of the cars in the city. In other words, every single person in that small city washed their car, because what's going to happen is going to rain. Unfortunately, in this apocryphal story that deals with a town whose name I can't remember, well, they didn't actually make it rain. They used so much water at the car wash that there was no more drinking water. So that just goes to show you that there's always, there's a parable lurking behind every problem, just like there's a solution lurking in every cereal box, or words to that effect. All I'm trying to tell you is, ladies and gentlemen, the heat seems to be getting to people. I was just walking around the office building the other day and looking at some of the signs that I saw in the office building. It was very clear to me that the heat is getting to people. Look at this. What on earth are they trying to say? I've been working on that one all day long. Pope costumes only permitted in the lobby. Where I come from, you can wear a Pope costume anywhere if you can get in it. On another floor of the building, free money. Free money. People just losing their senses, giving it away. How do you explain something like that? That's not all I saw. This blows me away. Dancers must provide proof of intestinal activity. For what reason, I forget. Today only, where I stopped to eat, it was less than you can eat for $12.99. But just for today, just for today. I think the heat is getting to people. And I really can't explain this one for you. I mean, you see, it's a sign-in sheet, but I don't know. And children under 12 years have to be accompanied by a tenor saxophone. Not where I come from. Not where I come from, but that just shows you that the heat is getting to people. Now, I talk to my basil every day, and you see what it does for my basil. We don't just, exchange practical jokes and banter about the weather. We go very deep into subjects, and because of that, they're doing so well. I also have animal friends who come to visit me on the 41st floor of my office building. I speak with them. They channel information to me, and I channel it back. And I asked them, how do you guys deal with this heat? And he pointed out, when we don't like something, we can just go somewhere else. And you guys with a mortgage and a car payment and a bunch of kids that you have to feed, you don't get to do that, do you? And yet you think you're the enlightened species. Well, anyway, for an enlightened species, the main hobby is always politics. And politics is really going strong these days. Just recently, I'm not going to cover everything, like I said. I told the staff not to bother me with all the details. I'm just going to focus on the things that caught my attention over the last little while since I've seen you. And one of those happens to be all of the big noise being made about President Obama's $1 million bus. $1 million bus. Now, a few things come to mind when I think about that. First of all, you know what it costs? You know, because what is the complaint? Costs too much. Too lavish an expenditure for the commander-in-chief. Well, first of all, do you know how much it costs for rock stars to maintain their big luxury bus, buy and maintain their big luxury bus operations? Well, I don't know either. I was trying to find that information and I couldn't. But no less than the Secret Service pointed out that they have been in the habit of renting big buses for election campaigns of this sort, presidential elections, and invariably they lease them, they equip them with all of the modern technology that's required to protect a president or a presidential candidate, and then they end up taking that equipment out when they sell back the bus they leased or give back the bus they were leasing. So they figured, may as well buy some. And think about this, ladies and gentlemen. If there are 300 million of us and the bus was $1 million, do you know that that's less than 1 cent a piece? In fact, some of those 300 million people are children, obviously, but on a child's allowance these days, even in these dire economic circumstances in which we find ourselves, most kids could, you know, pony up a penny and get back their 2/3 of the penny in change for helping to make the president comfortable. And think this through, because people are complaining about it being too lavish. Later, when there's a Republican presidential candidate, he'll get a similar bus too. So what is the hubbub about? It's obviously just wanting to attack. And we know what these bad feelings lead to, what they're really about. It's just that some people would like to see the president downscale his operation. Let me tell you what they have in mind. They want the motorcade, the presidential motorcade, to look a little bit more like that. You know, kind of bare bones. Would that be the right word? In fact, I don't think they even want a motorcade. I think they just want the president to get himself stood up on wheels and move around like that. You know, save some money. But I'll tell you something, that's not what's going on in the rest of the campaigns, and for them to be griping about it, I just think it's going a little bit too far. You know, there are several candidates out there who are doing things that are expensive, and there's other people who are doing things that are curiosities to kind of add to their brand name, their image. You see what I'm talking about? For example, I have my autographed picture of Michelle Bachmann's vehicle. Some of you, well, you can't see the autograph, can you? Look at that. Ready to serve, Michelle. And I can't say that I've been aboard the craft, but I've been pretty close to it, you know. Pretty nice touch. Now that our Texas governor, Rick Perry, is in the race, he is going to make a name for himself by moving around not in $1 million bus, but, you guessed it, come on, technician, can you follow me? On a horse, you see, because he can get away with it. And I think the idea here, of course, is that while Rick Perry can get away with it and already has boots and stuff, nobody else is going to be able to take over that little small part of the territory because he's already way out front there. Of course, now I think in the Republican campaign this year, there are also some Trojan horses, at least a couple of them, and they get around that way, you know. So what can I tell you? Arguing about a bus, I think that just proves that the debates need to be upgraded a little bit, or the airtime provided by all of the news networks to people who only want to talk about bus trips, that should be cut back considerably. One thing I keep hearing on the campaign trail this year is, and especially from the voices that that I guess we lovingly call the Tea Party, especially. One thing I keep hearing about is the need to take the country back. Now, have you thought about that, ladies and gentlemen? Take the country back. What on earth are they really talking about, I say to myself? For one thing, I'm not sure if they're talking about the country or the government. So over the last couple of days here, I've been trying to dig deeper into this subject and see if I can kind of get a handle on what the complaint is, because as far as I know, the country is still here. I have access to it, and you know, I'm paying for the services it provides. So as far as I could tell, the country and the government are still here. At least that's what I thought until I started doing my research. Whoa, did I find some things out. Did you know, ladies and gentlemen, that a couple of our western states don't belong to us anymore? Look at that. In the current issue of the new face of women's rugby, I found this article. Utah, Montana secretly sold to China some years ago. And of course, the question is, who's behind that? Why don't we know about it? Who wins in a deal like that and who loses? Well, it sounded like it could be what they were talking about. At least that's part of the country that they need to take back, Utah and Wyoming. But the more research I did, the less I believe this to be the real case. You see, for example, if you were to go to Utah and Wyoming, you would see that the signs haven't even changed. I mean, it's just like it used to be. The gas prices, same as everywhere else. If you go into the Walmarts and stuff, same merchandise. I just can't buy in to this conspiracy theory out there that says we sold off a couple of states that we didn't really need. But if that's not it, then what are they talking about? And I stumbled on something else in my research. This came as kind of a shock to me too. In the latest issue because it's not printed very often, Jazz Biscuit discusses a court giving back to the Indian tribes all of the land that's been stolen from them. And once again, I see that interesting commentary, who wins and who loses. When I see stuff like that, I wonder if this kind of talk is coming from some, how can I put this, right-wing propaganda outfit that makes up stories and puts them on the internet. Well, I'm going to tell you the truth. I made that one up. I made that one up. I wasn't going to tell you. I wasn't going to tell you, except that I was just going to test if you're paying attention, and also because I found a real article on the internet which is complaining about Obama wanting to give America back to the Indians. And this comes from the nominally overly moralistic, fundamental American Family Association. Have you ever noticed how the main thing that people want to do is give a nice sounding name to an organization that has maybe dubious aims? Well, that happens a lot. Anyway, I wrote that theory off. And you know what that would be about? That would be about taking America back from somebody who we took America from and now wanting to take it back from them again. That's what that would be, but I don't want to be either tautological or indifferent to complexity. I like to be both, don't you all? As I thought about this more, I said, well, maybe we're barking up the wrong tree, and then it occurred to me, all this talk about aliens for many, many years now, since Roswell, the speculation that maybe they're here among us, or at least they're visiting, and I turned up something amazing. This document in one of the rare monthly bulletins from the People for the Ethical Treatment of Asteroids. Don't move. Extraterrestrial group purchases the U.S. government, and it was for $24 million of glass. Did you notice what I just saw again? There it is. Who wins, who loses? When I saw that, of course, I became suspicious. Now a good case was made in the article that the Zeta Reticuli and some of the Syrians, I don't mean our native Syrians, I mean the star system Sirius, and some of the, well, they're so far out there in the Orion belt you wouldn't recognize them. They've been here for a long time and working with some of the militaries in some of the countries on the planet, and at a certain point they just said, look, we may as well buy this thing from you, and we've got some spare parts you can have, and we'll even teach you how to build one of our craft. And that's never happened. So I don't think that's it. I don't think that's who got America. And so, you know, we're talking about, as I said before, we're talking about the country. Is it the country itself that we need to take back? No. Is it the government we need to take back? Maybe it's both, and I think I finally stumbled on who it really is, but it doesn't fit the storyline. You see, it's right here in the Up Against the Wall Street Journal. The corporate takeover of the USA is basically complete at this point. Big business, as it says, now controls the White House, the Congress, the news media, and basically corporations are law unto themselves, because when they want to be people, they get to be people. And when they want to escape being punished for doing criminal acts that people would be jailed for, then they're not people anymore, because you can't find the right guy to put in jail. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen, since that, how shall we call it, since that chapter in our history where all of the Wall Street criminal activity was exposed, followed by a bailout of the very corporations that put most of the middle class underwater. Oh, by the way, maybe that underwater was to keep them cool for the drought that was coming. I hadn't thought of that. Anyway, you see what I'm getting at? We aren't taking care of the corporate criminals who are making it pretty bad for the rest of us. And when I say kiddingly that the corporate takeover of America is just about complete, well, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Look at this election cycle, look at the last one, and maybe look at the last 15 or 20 presidential election cycles. Money talks. Money talks. And been talking pretty loud for a long time, because it doesn't much matter what we vote for. The corporations get to say what laws get made, and the Supreme Court says they can back that up as much as they want with as much money and funding as they want, because they are people, you know, and they should be treated as such. Oh well. It bugs me, but one of the things that bugging the other voices out there, and notice the Republicans are out there first working, so that's why I'm talking so much about them. We'll get to some Democrats along the line here, but you also hear voices, especially from the minority of the right, of the far right, of the minority of the far right on the Republican side, shouting about the Constitution and how we need to be governed by the Constitution. So normally when you're talking about the Constitution, what you're talking about is the civil liberties that you would like to protect. You know, they're so important that governance is supposed to run along the lines of doing what's necessary, but never stepping over some lines that violate your civil liberties. And so, first thing, it's puzzling to me, if people are concerned about not following the Constitution, then why isn't there a stampede of people to join the American Civil Liberties Union? Well, it's because that's not really the way they're looking at this constitutional issue, and in fact they behave as if the Constitution says a bunch of things that I never learned about in high school civics or in my studies in college when I got my major in political science, they seem to think the Constitution is talking about a whole bunch of different things that aren't even the Constitution. You see what I'm trying to get at there? But I was enlightened by my researches on the internet during these last few days, and I have discovered that there are things in the Constitution we probably never noticed and or we never paid that much attention to until this became such a big deal lately. You know what I'm saying? Let me just take you on a little survey here. You may remember Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the Constitution, and it says that the Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts, and this is what I forgot, except to the extent that such actions enrage minorities with hidden agendas. Now, how could I have missed that? Honestly, I don't remember ever having to write a paper on that. But that's not all, ladies and gentlemen. I went a little bit further in here talking about Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. You could say that I was once again surprised, because here it says that no person except a natural-born citizen shall be eligible to the office of president. Here's the part I forgot. And if a case can be made with unsupported evidence widely circulated that an occupant is a pretender, that shall suffice to justify impeachment, removal, or things that weren't even envisioned at the time. Maybe you forgot about that too, huh? Let's not stop there. Let's go Article 2, Section 9. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. Look out, here it comes, except when a sleeping populace buys into bogus manipulation by what we imagine will eventually be called a war machine, creating artificial enemies. It's starting to make sense now. What else was in there that I forgot about when I got my degree? Article 2, Section 4. Ladies and gentlemen, the President, the Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Look out, unless they invoke a defense of national security or other convincing bullshit. Can I say that on TV? Oh, I guess I can say it here. This is where you hear free voices, and what would you call that but BS? I wish I could say that was all. Think about the Bill of Rights, those first 10 amendments. Look at number 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, including AK-47s and tactical nuclear weapons, shall not be infringed. Well, let me just give you one more, and then we'll close the book on it, because I know you're going to want to go back and read at least the Reader's Digest version of the Constitution, or you can probably find this one, this interpretation of the Constitution all over the internet, and certainly you can hear about it on talk radio. But let's just finish this up. Amendment 4. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, except by the FBI, the CIA, the DIA, the NSA, the DEA, the Department of Homeland Security, and certain employees of Rupert Murdoch. My goodness. Well, in another context, I'll try to get back to Rupert Murdoch, because that chapter, we've already talked chapters, so I guess we're on sub-chapters now, aren't we? That chapter is, are you trying to tell me something in the control room? You don't think we're playing that well in where? In Middle America. I'm not talking to Middle America. You know the control booth, they get a little shaky. You know, when I go off the rails, they get a little shaky. But don't worry, standards and practices cover everything we're talking about here. While we're still talking about politics, and now that you've remembered that there are parts of the Constitution you want to go back and look up and see what these people have been talking about. One of the people who might be jumping in to make things more interesting right now, that would be our own Governor Perry, Governor Rick Perry of Texas. And how that figures in to the current dynamic is that, well, things are pretty dynamic. I don't think he's the last one to enter the race. I think there will be several more entering, and of course there'll be several more exiting, and that's what it comes down to. A lot of entering and exit, and the man in the control booth is real. I think he's become very nervous now, giving me signals completely out of touch with reality. But you can understand that. I'm a professional. When I work live, I try to deal with these things. Anyway, Rick Perry seems to think he has the numbers, because what you always hear from his part of the world is about the Texas miracle, and it is a fact, ladies and gentlemen, that Texas is certainly doing better than a lot of the rest of the country is doing, and one of those reasons has to do, of course, with our oil and gas resources, the fact that we're so big, the fact that the fact that we're kind of unique among the rest of the states, and big. Let's go back to big and unique, and we wear boots and we ride horses, except most of us don't ride horses anyway. That is, many people in Texas, I have to be honest, many people in Texas are scared of horses. But you know what? They're also scared of lizards. Now, you may wonder what this has to do with Rick Perry. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with Rick Perry, but you know, he's always talking about the numbers, and one of the numbers is the job situation here. You know, we're doing so much better. Well, as most of you know who have paid some attention to the economic realities, one reason that we're doing pretty good turns out to be not that the private sector is performing so well. In fact, in the last cycle, the private sector is down about 0.6, but what's up, of course, is the public sector by about 5%. So when it balances out, yes, we're doing well. Is it because of private industry or anything that was done magically by our governor? One would have to say no. We have a governor who went to great lengths to complain about federal stimulus money and then used it to deal with our own debt issues, and as some of you might find troubling, found time to get rid of $4 billion for education, leaving a lot of teachers out of work and stuff. You know what I think it is? Rick Perry is confused sometimes about what numbers look good, and it's the bigness of the numbers, and there's confusion about it here. Like, if you have a look, we're 46th in income disparity here in Texas. We're 48th in teen birth rate. We're 50th in prenatal care. We're 50th in the number of persons with high school diplomas by the age of 25. Now, if those big numbers were more important than the numbers like first and second and third, you see, then we could make a convincing argument about how good the numbers are here. In fact, the numbers don't look very good. Let's play with these numbers a little bit more, folks. A recent article was talking about the job situation in Austin and mentioning 2,000 people a month applying at the Whataburger. Now, I'm not knocking the Whataburger. I mean, why would I do that? But what I'm pointing out is the kind of marvelous jobs available in Texas are not all high-end, professional stuff. We have 23 states that have lower unemployment than we do. But here in Texas, among these people who are working, 37% at minimum wage or below. And you think about it, you know, we're hearing all sorts of talk about fiscal responsibility and how it must be practiced, but in Texas, $27 billion, that was the projected budget shortfall. Our Texas debt doubled over the tenure of Mr. Rick Perry, the man who rides the horse and wears the boots, and 1 in 3 children in Texas are in poverty. I mean, I wish I could stop there and say, point well made, but Lynn Ashby has written some stuff in 2010 and again in 2011 that has even more numbers. For example, Texas is first in executions. Well, that might be appealing to some people, but to a lot of us, it's not particularly something to be proud of or happy about. Or the fact that we are last in per capita state appropriations for the arts. You know, when you have an artist like me on a show like this, you know I'm going to be beefing when the arts are cut short. Not only that, but you know, we lead in people getting screwed by electric power companies. You know, since the deregulation of that industry and the market being able to take off by itself, you remember this is a place where the Enron scandal kind of had a home. Okay. Anyway, our rates have leaped higher than any other state with similar deregulation. Now, am I just making this stuff up? No. But I'm kind of wondering what Rick Perry's miracle is that he's talking about, especially if you think about living conditions. Just take the numbers off of it as such and think about this. We're first in the amount of volatile organic compounds released into the air. We're first in toxic chemicals released into the water, and first in recognized cancer-causing carcinogens released into the air. As for the release of carbon dioxide, Texas would rank 7th in the world if it were its own country. Our amount is more than California and Pennsylvania, the second and third ranking states combined. It sort of makes us swell with pride, or maybe just swell, as Lynn Ashby points out. And so that's why when the rest of the world looks at Rick Perry standing up to the EPA for wanting to make our air breathable and water potable and things like that, I kind of wonder what kind of air and what kind of water he's been drinking too much of. But the answer is pretty simple: Texas water. So that's why I drink just bottled water, and I breathe air that comes from other planets and is purified by mystical techniques. And that's how I maintain my clarity of vision, even though that man is governor. But we have to say this. It's making the race interesting in that Rick Perry has talked a lot about Texas's right to secede from the Union. And I'm not going to get into a legal argument here. If you want to make an argument that Texas has a right to secede, if you look at serious legal papers, they will say as much as anybody has a right to secede. But the thing that is provided for when Texas came into the Union was that Texas could choose to be 5 states, and that means 10 senators. Heavy-duty stuff, huh? We are kind of unique in that sense. And normally when people think about this, we think of 5 more largely cowboy states. At least that's what the Republican Party in Texas, which has done such a bang-up job of redistricting over the years, is trying to manage and trying to perpetrate. But I just want to give you one little thing per perspective, just for perspective. In the last presidential election cycle, even though you will see the maps with the blue and the red, and Texas is mostly red, what would you find that would be blue? Well, you would see that Houston went for President Obama, Dallas went for President Obama, San Antonio went for President Obama, and Austin went for President Obama. Now, if you put all of those together, ladies and gentlemen, just to be perfectly fair, there is the big chunk of the population of this state of Texas in it, I-N-N-I-T. Isn't that cute the way that I use the colloquial? Anyway, I am a man of words and music, but anyway, the point is very simple, ladies and gentlemen. If we were to divide Texas into 5 states, I think we should have Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and then the rest of it would be a good idea. Not going to catch on in some circles, I realize that, but it's just my idea. And that crazy man in the control booth is talking again. I know I've got about 15 minutes. I mean, hey, I'm going to keep it all the stuff that we talked about. I'm going to get to it today. 15 minutes. That's what he's saying. 15 minutes. Okay. I just want to finish though by saying, you know, as for Rick Perry, he did make a very bold impression, and most of you know why. It's not even the boots, ladies and gentlemen. It's the hair. And I think because the hair is so important, and he's going to potentially make the others work harder to maintain their relative status or to try to upseat, you know, the front runner. But I think I'm gonna get on the action. I have a new business model here. Maybe you can pin this down for the folks. I'm gonna pick it up here. This just makes it easier on him. Look at this. Hairdos and don'ts. Hairdos and don'ts. And I'm only going to work for people who have plenty of money. In other words, at this point, all the rock and roll stars already have pretty good hair. It's the people in politics who could stand, you know, some dressing up, you know, or some getting down, however you want to look at it. Anyway, before the Democrats get into it, which will just be a question of whether they want to run somebody against President Obama because they have as many beefs on the left side of the equation as the people on the right have about the current sitting president, I just want to say that so far people are already tiring. They're already tiring of what's going on in the race, and because of that, I think a real competition for president would have to be broader based than the one we have now. For example, candidates could be on Dancing with the Stars, so we see how they move across the floor, and then we'd put them on a survival show. There's so many clone survival shows these days, it doesn't matter which one, but you know, you want to see the presidential candidates forced to eat tarantulas or lizards, which I mentioned earlier, or eggs of some kind that they can't identify. And then you could put them on Mythbusters so that their biggest claims could be exposed on Mythbusters or defended if they turned out to be true. Then we could also run them past American Idol and see what kind of pipes they have. And for finishing it off, maybe a NASCAR event or some wrestling event, something like that. You see what I'm saying? And then at the end of that, we would have a pretty well-rounded picture of what these candidates look like and what they can really do. Enough politics. I always try to add in a little public health kind of a notice, and so that's what I'll do. Here's just a couple of points about health, and here's my boy. I tell you, the technicians on this show, they really make their wage. But have you had your shoes checked for foot occupancy this year? If you haven't, it could be the most important thing you're going to do. Then again, I guess it might not be. I guess it might not be. But anyway, it is something you could do. And by the way, I think that because of the heat, you know, I mentioned the heat earlier, and I mentioned the kind of weird things that are going on, you know, based on the things I see around the office and around town. But I think there are new mental illnesses that are springing up. I mean, I think a lot of people, they have a fear of nicknames, some people, and they have a fear of rubbery skin, And I think a lot of people, I can't remember exactly where I saw this research, but these days you have people with a fear of being seen as not fearing what can't be seen. You got that? I forgot what the name of that disease is, but maybe we can have a contest and everybody can name it. And when I say everybody, let's plug in here for a minute to the social network. You know, I mentioned Rupert Murdoch earlier, and his cadre of reporters. They were out, not yet. Let me set this up first. His cadre of reporters were out on the turf, hacking phones and getting sensitive details about people that were in the news so that they could sell more newspapers. And I was thinking how naive some people are about what they automatically put on Facebook that everybody can read. And then I started thinking about software and applications and stuff like that. But here's what came to me. I'll get to applications in a minute because I know a lot of you like me to apply things. But as far as Facebook goes, it just so happens that I bumped into a Facebook page the other day for a lady I knew a long time ago, maybe say a dozen years ago, as a matter of fact. And the picture that was on her Facebook was the same picture from about a dozen years ago. And so I says to myself, I wonder when I first saw this picture a dozen years ago, if that picture was already a dozen years old. You see what I'm saying? And I think that there is a movement now to have real stuff on Facebook, and I believe that faces may not be important. And I think where it could be going is that people who want to be honest but don't want to be, they don't want to be stalked on Facebook. For example, a colleague of mine told me the other day, because I had seen on her Facebook page that she was living in Georgia, and I knew not that she was living in Georgia, so I got in touch and I said, when did you move to Georgia? And she said, I didn't move to Georgia, but nobody else knows that on Facebook. You know, the way you distance yourself. So in the new version of Facebook that I would put out there, it would be not your Facebook. This guy didn't finish with his application. He had his hand, which was another body part, and that is his real hand right there. And I think he was going to put his belly button picture here, but he couldn't get a very good belly button picture. So he never finished it out. But just imagine how the turf changes when you have a safe place to say who you really are and what you really think, and not worry about whether your face is even involved. Because, you know, people talk about how we used to be a faceless society, or do they? Or did I just imagine that because of all of the things in the air and the water here in Texas? I can't remember. My memory seems to be going ever since that guy, Rick Obama, became governor. But, I know what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about applications because, you know, I've got my iPads and my iPhones and my smart devices of all kinds, and people are always talking about the kind of things that they'd like to see. So, for example, I was chatting with some friends about just what they would like to see in an application for their smartphone or tablet. And one of my lady friends was pretty right on it. She said, I want an app that tells me if a man is rich. And I thought about that. That might be technically possible if it was a question of your little smart device reading those stripes on the credit cards in somebody's wallet and then coming to a conclusion about how many cards they had. But of course, since people are so massively in debt, it wouldn't necessarily mean that this guy's a good catch, now would it? Another lady friend wanted a jerkometer, something that would instantly tell her whether somebody was for real or not. And another lady friend, she just put it more bluntly, she wanted an app that would automatically identify Mr. Right the first time that he showed up in the arena. That's that's pretty ambitious. I think something, though, that almost everyone would want, if we go back to the top of our page, if you could take your little tablet or your little smartphone and you could turn it into an air conditioner. Now wouldn't that take care of the first thing that we were talking about today, the unnecessarily hot, almost relentlessly, overbearingly hot summer that we're having here in an era where there is absolutely no global warming? Well, that may not be technically possible today, but remember, back in the 1890s, Tupperware was probably a dream. Or was it? It was probably an accident. Anyway, if there were one application that everybody could get behind, I think I know what it is. I just don't know how to build it yet. You know those ridiculous scam letters you get about my dead uncle who worked at the bank and was the head of a petroleum company, left $62 million, and now I'm dying of starvation, and I want to give this to somebody who's a good Christian, and I found your name. And anyway, wouldn't it be wonderful if every time an email came like that, you could hit the Destroyer app and know that somewhere across the world, on some continent, or right next door to you, because you don't know where the damn thing came from, whoever sent you that piece of garbage just found himself vaporized. I mean, not in a way that ends his corporeal existence, but maybe just vaporized. Wouldn't that be fun? I think everybody liked that. Anyway, I was going to talk about parking problems tonight too, so let me just say one thing as I go out of here. Can you believe that some people in your office building, I'm sure, can't seem to find that yellow line and can't seem to get two tires in between those yellow lines, and think that a compact car where it says compact cars only is actually a car twice as big as you that's parked next to you? Not that I'm complaining. This is what makes well, I was going to say it's what makes America great, but I don't think you'd buy that, would you? Anyway, it's been fun coming in here, sharing these wonderful memories and wonderful projections of the future and observations about the present with you, my dear friends, all over the world, of one political stripe or another, and whoever it is you're voting for in your fantasy football league this year, I hope they do well. And I hope that if you have extra tickets some week, that you'll think of the guy who always comes here on TV, talks to you directly and personally, and likes football. Well, anyway, until I can talk to you again, y'all have a good time and be kind to each other and stay healthy. Good night.